welcome back to another episode of the Lender Podcast. I'm Bryce. I'm your host. Today we're with Mr. Jason Balin. Jason, thanks for being here.
Bryce, I appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
So unless you've been living under a rock, Jason is the man when it comes to hard money, private money. They've got a very, very successful operation that I'm excited to dive into today. They've also got a very successful podcast. They've got a very successful YouTube channel, email marketing. You guys are a well-oiled machine, and I strive to get there someday. But you've definitely been a mentor of mine, so I appreciate you being on the podcast and imparting some wisdom with us.
Yeah, very nice, kind words, Bryce. I appreciate it.
Well, they're all true. I promise I'm not just buttering you up. So I think this will be very, very great for the audience. So for those of the listeners who have been living under a rock and have no idea who you are, give us kind of your elevator pitch and your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Jason Balin. The majority of my time is spent running Hard Money Bankers, which is a private lending company in the Mid-Atlantic area. So DC, Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Mid-Atlantic, East Coast. That's where we focus. We started this company in 2007 with my business partner, Chris Haddon, and I. Had no idea anything about this business at that point. We were like lots of folks now that own or run private lending or hard money lending companies. They came from the real estate space or the mortgage space, and they didn't like the control. They didn't like the inconsistencies. It was very hard work to flip houses and to own rental properties. And we figured it would just be easier kind of being on the lender side. We like the finance side a lot more. You know, back in the mid 2000s, the market was very different than it is today. There was no liquidity, or it was limited liquidity, I should say. If you searched or looked for a private lender or hard money lender, typically you found like older 70-year-old attorney type that maybe owned a title company, and those were really the capital sources and the investors, the lenders back then. They didn't have like formal flushed out hard money lending operations like they do today. There was no institutional capital back then. You know, capital in general was hard to find, but if you could get your hands on it, as a lending company, it did make your life a lot easier back then because there was no competition. And back in the day, the good old days when we could charge 15% and 5 points,
which is just insane to think now.
It was great. And then the institutional lenders came in and mixed this up, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Back in the day, there was a lot of 100% financing, and there's good opportunities. And when I say back in the day, it was kind of like between the real estate market between like 2001 and 2007 was very, very hot, and then 2007 into 8, Great Depression or Great Recession, I should say. A lot of stuff shook up, and then 2009 to 12 was kind of at the bottom. And then institutional capital kind of came in around 14 or 15 and really shook it up because the market was just so much lower. So I haven't obviously seen everything. I've only really been through one big real estate cycle, but I learned a lot, and we were kind of lucky that we started this in like 07, 08, right? Like if I had started this in 05 and, had, 100 deals in my books, and then 07 came and
you might not still be here.
Yeah. You don't know, but I've kind of learned how to be very, very conservative with our investors' capital and our capital, mostly because it wasn't any of our capital when we started. And I was terrified to ever have to, come to the office one day and make a call that an investor lost money, and knock on wood, that hasn't happened after almost 4,000 loans. So, amazing. but it is something that it's something I fear. And because of that, it's caused us to be very, very cautious. And that, is part of our business model.
Which is amazing. Amazing. Okay. So a lot of things to dive in there first, but I am curious. So like you said, 2007-ish, I'm sure that hard money, private money, like you said, was not nearly as common as it is today. It seems like a very interesting like career path. What was kind of the catalyst that like got you guys started? Like, I know you touched base like briefly on the mortgage lending, but like that seems like an interesting shift.
Yeah. So right after college, So my business partner Chris and I both went to college together, or both went to high school together. So and middle school together. So we know each other there.
Oh,
And
I didn't know that. Wow.
yeah, we went to high school together, and we were friends. I wouldn't say best friends, but we were friendly. We played high school sports together, and I went to college. He went to college, and after college, we both moved back into the area, to the local area where we grew up, which is like Montgomery County, Maryland, which is just outside of Washington D.C., about 30 minutes south of our office. And we both realized we were entrepreneurial and into business and making money and things like that. I became a real estate agent at that time. He was working at a bank. It was SunTrust Bank, which is now Truist Bank, and he was doing loans. About a year or two after I started selling real estate, I was like, selling real estate is hard. Like, I thought it was the best job ever. And I remember talking to my parents, be like, why doesn't everybody do this? I just sold a house to a buddy of mine, from high school, and I made $5,000. This is great. And they're
Right.
and they kind of like, yeah, just keep it going. And I realized
Ignorance
it
is
was
bliss.
yeah, exactly. That it was challenging. So then I started working at a mortgage company as well. And probably like year two into that mortgage company, and being in the mortgage industry at that time, I don't want to say it was easy, but like, this was with subprime lending and stuff like that. Like, it wasn't, there was a lot of refinances going on and stuff like that. But I'll never forget that I was talking to this borrower, and, I thought the deal was good, but I took it to my boss, and, in essence, we were correspondent lending and, selling these loans to other lenders, and we couldn't get it approved. And I was like, Mark, this deal's good. Like, these are the reasons. It's low collateral. I know that, his current situation isn't great, but like, I feel like it's a good credit risk. So he looked at me and was like, let me see that deal. And he looked at the file. He's like, you know what? Here, give me this deal. We'll do this. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I'll just be the lender on the deal and I'll fund the deal. And that was kind of and this was an owner occupied property. A lot of people back in the day were doing owner occupied deals.
Oh.
They were called Section 32 loans. So in essence, you could do a high, there was still a usury, but you still could do it. Like today, you really couldn't lend on something like that. It had to be an amortized loan over a certain period of time and stuff like that. But it's called a Section 32 loan. They had like, a rescission period and things like that. Regardless, like, that got me thinking of like, oh wow, like, you can just be the lender, like, you can be the bank. I mean, think about it when you're in your 20s and you don't really have any proper education or with that, and all of a sudden you just be like, oh, you're the bank, you're Wells Fargo, you're Bank of America. Like,
right.
It was definitely a new topic that I wasn't, I had no idea about back then. And I realized, then that he had about 100 loans in their portfolio, and that was part of their strategy and this was only primary residence that they would do back then. I wouldn't certainly recommend doing that now, but he did. And the way he did it is he would do like subprime private loans to collateral based, with the hopes that his exit strategy would be to help them get their credit up and then refinance them into a traditional loan at a lower interest rate. And he would get two loans on it. He would get a high interest rate now. And he raised private capital, even though he was pretty well off, this guy. So I don't want to say I learned the business from him, because I didn't. We didn't really ever discuss that. But that was kind of the topic and the idea. And then years later, when my business partner Chris and I were going to we want to start a company, and we're like, let's go start a mortgage company. And this was like early 2007. And our like, we set up an entity, we did everything, and we're like, this is also pre-licenses. You didn't need a mortgage license back then like you need today. And the goal was, cool, we're going to start this mortgage company. And that was going to be the plan, just like we had already known how to do mortgages and sell them and who were buying them and the companies. And then, lending operations started going out, countrywide closed and things like that. And Chris and I had hooked up with an attorney that had owned a mortgage company and a title company as well. And we were talking to him, and he was like, dude, you guys should just start a hard money lending company. I can help you with legal docs and some of the other stuff and do your title review. I might actually know some people that want to invest in some of these deals. Like, it would be way better just to concentrate on the hard money lending side instead of being a mortgage company. And that's kind of where it started, was that. So we had the aha moment. I'm sorry, we had like how to do it years ago. The real aha, which I kind of skipped over, was, and I think this is a similar situation to you, Bryce, was we were flipping a few houses at the time and owned some rental properties. And I was flipping a house in New Jersey, which was out of market, with a buddy of ours that I went to college with. And Chris and I were, in essence, we put up some capital into that deal from a HELOC that I had on my primary at the time. And the whole darn thing took 9 months. It took so long. I got sick once when I was up there, like changing out fascia and soffit that I had no right being on a ladder doing because I didn't know. I thought it was cool because I watched Flip This House, season 1 because that's when it was back when it was back then. And I was like, this sucks. Like, and I was telling you this earlier or another time, Bryce, about this guy Ray out of Texas who lent money to us at 15 and 5. And I was like, fuck, man, I need to be Ray because this is hard. This is hard work. So like those were all kind of the aha moments that came together. And then, at some point, if you want, I can share the first deal we ever did at Hard Money Bankers and how that went. Okay. But that was kind of the aha of like getting understanding it and be like, you're right. Like we should just be the lender for these hard money. And one of the things I hated doing B2C stuff, like business consumer stuff. So I was really excited to work with real estate investors and not consumers that were emotional about the transaction. And I also had like a small area of time that I was doing some wholesale, wholesale mortgages as well. And I knew a lot of mortgage brokers that I made relationships with through that. So I kind of figured like, oh, hey, I know people that want hard money loans. Like this should be easy. So that's kind of the end of like before HMB started.
Right. Oh, wow. Okay. So the biggest question I have is, we've talked about this before. Like you kind of have that natural progression. You go from rentals to flipping, and then you decide this sucks, and you move to the lending. You had that a little bit, but the biggest thing I see is that a lot of people will move like the equity or their working capital from flipping into lending, and it sounds like you didn't really have that. Like you guys were pretty broke when you started, which is 100%. is a good testament to kind of how scrappy you guys are, but B, I think that gives a lot of hope to other individuals who want to get into lending but don't have any capital. So what was that like when you don't really have this track record already? Trying to, it's what was that like?
Yeah, it. So again, being naive is sometimes a good thing because you don't know what you don't know, and we thought that raising capital was going to be the hardest thing in the world because we were under the impression it's like, oh yeah, we have all these deals, which we thought were deals. They weren't deals, but we thought it's like, oh, I know all these people. I know brokers, and keep in mind, there wasn't all that much capital in that space. And a lot of it came from, older guys that people didn't want to deal with, but they used it because that was kind of the only capital available in the local area. And the DC area had lenders. DC and Baltimore don't overlap all that much because they're just two different markets, even though they're only 40 minutes apart. And, I grew up in the DC area and I had worked in Baltimore for a while and we're hanging out in Baltimore and owned a property there. So like I knew both those areas and neither one of them overlapped. So like if we could be DC lenders, then we could be Baltimore lenders. And that didn't exist before. Nobody was doing both markets back then. And point being is I thought we had all these deals. So we're like, okay, Chris, how are we going to go find deals? And Chris has told stories about how like he used to put on a suit to go do investor appointments because he thought that's like how you have to raise capital. Because we didn't know, and I mean we're mid to late 20s at this point, so we didn't fully know exactly what to expect. Like we didn't have like family money to like our parents weren't going to give us money into this stupid venture, so like that wasn't like we weren't even going to ask that. That wasn't an option. And the guy that the attorney that in essence was helping us with like doc prep and stuff like that. There was a little hope there because he was like, hey, listen, I've got a family member that, has some money in a 401k, I might be able to help him convert it into a self-directed IRA for you guys. And you guys can use some of that money to lend out on. And, we can split the points up and stuff like that. So we kind of had that of, okay, cool. Maybe that'll be an option. And, he kind of helped us with some people that he knew. Not necessarily the heavy lifting, but like, hey, I did docs for this particular guy and he lent it out to some idiot and he's going to lose money on this deal, but he still has more money. If you find a good deal, he might be interested in investing with you, things like that. So we had situations like that. And it was funny because the original business model wasn't to like service loans. It was kind of just broker loans, just like the regular mortgage industry. So it was like, cool, we find the deal, we keep the points, you keep the interest rate. And we learned that backfired deal one after we brokered a deal to somebody and they're like, okay, cool. Well, how do I get my monthly payments? Who's the bar? Like they didn't know anything about it. They were like, okay, cool. Like when do I get my payment? Like, we don't care about the deal. We just want our 15% rate of return.
Right.
So we're like, yeah, that might not be a good model because we're doing like, forget the economic side of it, but it was like, we're doing all the heavy lifting. And then, like, we're essence just servicing this for free for these guys. That's where we came up with the note rate -3 that we stand by today. So back in the day, it was 15%. The investors got 12. We would get 3 to service it. Today, it's, we lend out at 12.99 or 13, and they get 10, and we get 2.99 or 3, and keep all the points. So, like, a lot of this just kind of stemmed from setting it up like that. And we did, like, investor presentations where we met up with, people. Like, we invited people that we thought were high net worth. They weren't, but, like, we didn't know that. Like, we didn't, like, anyone who was like, hey, you want to invest in these deals? And we did, like, lunch and learns. I mean, we did try everything. I mean, we had a website that we took down because it probably wasn't, compliant years later, called I Hate My Stock Portfolio. Like, different types of things that we tried to raise capital with. But one, I know this sounds kind of crazy, but one of, like, the best capital source investors that we had, and we still have today, were other hard money lenders that just weren't, they just didn't have the deal flow or as good as deal flow. So they'd look at it and be like, we can use, 2007 rates or 8 rates, but, like, in essence, it was like, cool, I'd rather get 12% on a really good deal than, like, what I'm charging now on not a great deal, and you guys can do all the work. And that was kind of the sell, was like, hey, you can make more if you're doing these deals yourself, but you have, like, liquid cash over here, not doing anything with this. Like, you can also do our deals. And today, we still have a lot of capital investors that are like that. They're going to get 10% in our deals, and if they find their own deals, they're going to charge whatever they want. And typically our deals end up being better because we built a marketing machine to try to get lots and lots and lots of good deals. But that's not really a place that I think a lot of folks think about on the front end, to, like, just go to their hard money lenders and see, if they want to invest in your deals. But that worked for us. And the first deal that we ended up doing actually was in Ohio, even though I don't know why it's in Ohio. We've never done a deal in Ohio since, and never would. And we're a local lender, but it was a deal that came to us, and the guy owned, like, and we learned a lot from it because he owned 3 or 4 single family houses and 1 commercial property, and we collateralized all of them. Luckily we did have that attorney early on that knew how to paper some of these files. So that helped us, because I didn't know how to paper that, how to collateralize some of that. I mean, there's a lot of sophisticated real estate investor or hard money lenders today that I talk to that don't know how to collateralize something like that. But that was just the legal side of it. And it was a $150,000 loan. We charged 15%, 5 points, $1,000 commitment fee, or, like, junk fee, some valuation fees. And the attorney I was telling you about, one of his investors that he knew put up the $150,000, and the loan stayed on our books for, like, 4 years because, what's the problem when you do a rental property loan and you're just giving a borrower cash out? They don't have exit strategy. Right. And typically there's more risk in a deal like that. I don't know that then. I know that now. And it ended up fine. I mean, we made a good amount of money on it, but that payment was made out to, or when we closed the loan, the lender, the HUD, actually the lender was the personal guy's he was the lender technically on paper, because we didn't know how to do assignments back then. But all the money was made out to a different entity, our home buying entity that Chris and I had, and we took that money and we went to the bank, set up Hard Money Bankers LLC, Hard Money Bankers everything, and we took that $7,500 and put it right into that account. So we took $7,500 from the points, we put it in that account, and then I don't know where the other junk fees went. Maybe that went in there as well. And that was it. And that was December 2007. And then year 1, it was either 18 or 23 loans in 2008.
Wow. My goodness. Wow. Okay. And then 2009, 2010, what did that look like? Doubled. Were you still pretty busy, or was it just
every year was doubling? We doubled for 8 years, I would say.
Okay.
I think we're going on year 17, and we've been pretty stagnant for the last 10, or 8 or something like that. But yeah, it was 18 or 23 loans, and we went, I know full year 2 went to 56. Then I think we went to about 98 or 100. It was about double every year. And the funny thing is, it was just myself and Chris, and we didn't have identified roles of, like, now it's we overlap in some stuff like marketing and business growth stuff, but I'm very much front end of, origination and underwriting and running processing teams and stuff. And he's very much back end CFO, accounting, controlling, portfolio management, servicing, stuff like that. Defaults. So, but we didn't have that back in the day. It was like, oh, this capital investor, you go talk, or let's go talk to him together. But you run point. Oh, the phone rings. Cool. Let's, you talk to him because you answered the phone, type of thing. And then eventually, and God dang, this stuff dates me too when I'm about to say this. But but then it kind of got then it got to a point where we kind of divided up roles. And back in the day, they probably still have this, but it was called a Vonage phone, which is like a voice over IP, and Vonage was the thing. Yep. And I had this find something that could be like a phone here in my office, but got this ruler. So in essence, we'd have this Vonage phone, and anywhere I would go, I would just plug it into the internet, and then that was my office line. So I would bring it home and put it in at my house, and I'd bring it in and I put it in the office, and that was my my bat phone that I had everywhere, because back then we started marketing, and marketing came really quick. Our phones were ringing off the hook just from kind of being active. We went to we did a lot of stuff. I can't underplay that, but we went to RIAs every night. We divided territories. Chris was in DC because he was living there in the time. I was living in Baltimore. So I went to the Baltimore RIAs and the meetup groups. This was before meetup. It was just called RIAs. I went to those. He went to these. We were literally working out of our car because we would go to and do upfront inspections and valuations on all these properties and do all the inspections. Chris would bring his checkbook with him with handwritten checks. And then we'd write checks for construction inspections. Everything. We had everything kind of in order. It was kind of a mess. We used to have these yellow folders. So that was our processing underwriting folder. So we had, say I was working on 6 files at a time. I would just take those 6 folders with me. We'd have an office that we'd work out of, but you didn't know what was going to happen throughout the day, and you have to talk to people. And I did have my cell phone, obviously, that I talked to people as well on, but I'd be in the car and I'd have my 6 folders sitting next to me. These are our 6 underwriting files before they close. And I'd go and I get the construction scope workout, and I go talk to the borrowers about it. And I learned a lot being on the road, and we created really, really good relationships with borrowers. And in essence, I was in DC Monday, Baltimore Tuesday, DC Wednesday, Baltimore Thursday. And I'd go to the office in the morning for a few hours. Then I'd beat rush hour traffic, and then I'd have to leave DC by 3, go back to the office. And then that's when I would start answering calls, returning phone calls, and things like that. And it was well-oiled machine for, first 5 years before we hired anybody. It was wild. But I wasn't working when we started. Chris actually still was working at SunTrust for maybe the first year. But this was, and, but whatever, the good part about this business is there is low overhead, especially at the beginning.
Right.
Typically payroll adds up, marketing expenses adds up. There's other stuff that adds up. But at the beginning, you can do this with nothing. I'm talking if you want. No expenses. Your personal cell phone, personal computers, some gas money. That's it. You can do. So I remember if we used to do a deal and we made we've never done a capital contribution back into the business except that first deal. That was our seed capital that we did. And every deal after that, we took out money. And we used to take out money on a per deal basis, and then eventually it just turned into monthly distributions or quarterly distributions. But we closed the deal and we made $6,000, and we're cool. Let's each take out $2,500 and leave $1,000 in the hopper. And we didn't have to have a lot of reserves. It got to the point eventually as we grew where we realized we had to be the capital investor in these deals because we're giving up too much by just not being the capital. We should be the private investor. So then eventually, we would put more capital back in the company, into accounts for that. But early on, until whatever, we were able to make, as in our 20s, we were able to make, whatever, $50,000, year one, owning our business. We had very little overhead. So it worked out. And then again, just start doubling for a period of time.
Well, and 15 years ago, that's a pretty good wage, fresh out of college. That's impressive.
Yeah, it worked. But we were definitely the young guys on the street. This is, I think, 2 or 3 years after YouTube started. So we had some crappy digital cameras. So we started taking YouTube videos, and if anyone wants to see any crappy YouTube videos, our actual YouTube page for our lending business is Hard Money Bankers, and just descend by, date, and you'll see some from 2008, maybe, or 9, or early on, and they're really crappy videos. Not just low quality, but just very bad videos. But like, we were like, let's just do this. Like, let's just jump in. Like, we weren't really scared to do anything. The only thing I was scared about was losing capital from investors. And I mean, we were very, like, I don't want to say we were more conservative than today, but like we were very conservative, like, because you didn't know what you want to know. And there's deals that I remember passing on that we were like, God, that was such a good deal. Why did we pass on that? But I will say that if you don't have capital to start with, or you're in the midst of raising capital, the easiest way to do that is just do the best deals ever, because the capital investor will never say no. And there's like always a few buying questions that when we would go on investor meetings and we would talk to, or we present deals to capital investors, they'd be like, wait a sec, I don't get it. Why wouldn't this person just go to a bank? They got good credit. They're putting 40% down. They've done this before. Like, it doesn't make sense to me why they wouldn't just use a bank. And we're like, oh, damn, we got them, because they're not walking away from that deal, right? Like, if they ask that question, they must think how strong that deal is. And the answer, obviously, is like, listen, this person's very bankable, just like a lot of the borrowers that we work with, but they need to close next week. They don't want to go through
all the hoops,
all the red tape by doing so. It's just easier. And I know, them paying 15 or today 12 to 13% is seems like very expensive, but it's cheaper than them missing out on this deal. And it just won't work. And that was always that was kind of always like made us feel good when people would say that. Investors would be like, I don't get why these guys were just used for a bank, because a lot of people think that hard money lending, there's a stigma of, well, number one, the term hard money. Like, what does that even mean?
Right.
Like, that seems like a bad term, but more importantly, they think it's subprime lending or high risk lending. And, I don't believe it is. I mean, it could be if you structure it like that, but it doesn't need to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Well, and you made a good point too. And I tell people this a lot, because there's, especially when you're getting started in real estate, you're naive, right? You're ignorant. You don't know what's going on. And you're like, man, I don't have the funds. I don't have the capital. And the thing is, you don't know what you don't know. And you think there's not capital out there. But I tell people this all the time. Like, if you have a deal and it's a good deal, the capital will come. Like, if you have no deals, seriously, like I will tell people that want to get started in real estate, like, spend 4 hours a day knocking doors, and I guarantee you will find a deal, and then post it either in a RIA group or come to someone like you or I. And if you really do have a rock star deal, like, the money is so easy to find. It's the easiest part. Yeah. Hey, really quick, I need to interrupt the episode to talk about this week's sponsor, which of course is Lender. Lender is a hard and private money origination and servicing tool. So if you're currently using something like Excel to handle all of your business needs, it's about time that you upgrade to something a little bit more sophisticated like Lender. Lender helps you handle all of just the nitpicky, nuanced, tedious things that we have to do as lenders, like dealing with loan doc generation and preparation, or dealing with document storage, or collecting files from all of the borrowers and LLC docs, collecting monthly payments, and then at the end of the year having to deal with tax statements and generating 1099s and 1098s. It really is just a one-stop shop from start to finish. It helps you all the way from origination through servicing to payoff. It automatically generates payoff statements for you. You don't have to miss any extension fees or deal with prorated interest. It just, the whole system handles it for you. So if you're currently using something like Excel, I highly recommend that you upgrade to something a little bit more sophisticated, just to keep your borrowers all organized, just to keep your investors in the loop. And I highly recommend it. You can check that out by going to joinlender, lendr.com, joinlender.com, and check it out. And I know it's going to transform your business just like it has mine. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah, I agree with you. But especially folks newer, everyone thinks it's a good deal, and it might not be, right? Like, you don't know what a good deal is. Like, and I'm talking about like a real good deal. Like, I'll give you a quick story on this. So March 2020, right when COVID kind of hit, one of a good buddy of ours who's got a few $1 million invested in deals with us, and he's a friend. He was like, he was asking me about my opinions on some stuff. And he's like, yeah, I'm just going to be sidelined here to see what things shake up. And I'm like, what do you mean you want to be sidelined? You're going to take all your money and put it in cash and just be sidelined? He was like, well, I'm a little scared of what's going on. I don't want the real estate market to crash. And I'm like, listen, dude, there's a difference between being sidelined and just being more conservative. And I'm cool with that. So I gave him an example, and I'm like, hey, listen, let's say this is a property in DC that I had just gotten, and the guy got it at a really good price. He put it under contract like during COVID, like the few days of COVID. And I'm like, let's say so-and-so comes to you and they bring you 123 Main Street in Northwest DC, and they get it under contract for 600, and they come to you for a loan. And let's say they only need 300. Would you do that deal? He's like, of course, man. It's a home run deal. Of course I do that deal. I'm like, well, you're not sidelined yet. And guess what? I have that deal because this guy called me yesterday and he asked, and I was conservative and I was nervous, and I told him to put down 50% of his purchase price and we'll fund the rest, because that's what we told everybody for 3 weeks during COVID. And we still had a bang up portfolio. We got the best of the best borrowers, because guess what the alternative had? Nothing.
Right.
No one else was lending, and this is pre-Pierce Street going under, but like none of the institutional capital sources were lending, and a lot of people were scared to lend, and I get it. So structure it to make you not scared. And he's like, oh, I'll do that deal. You guys need an investor on that deal? and and I was like, that's not the point. Probably not. But like what the point being is like structure it the way that it makes you feel good. Like, pretend it's all your grandmother's money. And listen, if you're over conservative, is it hard to grow? Yeah. Is it hard to get good deals? Yeah. So like, you got to pick your poison. Like, do you want to be more aggressive and potentially like more risky to do a little bit more volume? You want to be more conservative and do less volume? Like, you got to figure out, what works best for you and your personality type and your threshold. And I'd like to say we intuitively did this, but I don't know if that's true. But like, we always were marketing from the beginning, like going to RIAs, doing stuff. Nobody told us to do that. I guess we kind of just were like, hey, we should just go find deals. And the more we marketed and the more deals we got, the better our deals were, because we just had tons and tons of them coming in. And, there's been different seasons inside our business where deal flow has been down, deal flow has been up, quality's down, quality's up. That's always the case. And let's be honest, like if you're used to doing lots of deals and, your deal flow is really low one week, you're going to be like, oh crap. And then you might do a deal that's a little bit more risky. And on the other side, you have tons and tons of deals. You might cherry pick the best of the best and pass on deals that you did the week before. But that's the decision that you can make. And, the beauty of this business is you can get the same deal in the same bar that comes to you 3 times in a row or 3 weeks in a row, and you can quote them different numbers based on how you feel as the owner of this company and as the investor and the lender. And you could be like, you know what? I think I want to be at 100 grand today. And maybe yesterday you quoted the guy 90, and maybe tomorrow you're feeling good and you quote him 110, and you can make that decision. But you got to be able to be responsible and, be a good steward of your investors' capital and your own family capital if you're putting the money up. And, you're not making your money when you close a deal like a mortgage broker or a real estate agent would make money. You're making money when that loan pays off. And there's a lot to be said about that. And it's a different thought process than I think a lot of folks are used to.
Yeah. Tell me, so I've struggled with this because you're definitely more conservative than I have been in the past. And I think you're more conservative than most, which is probably a good thing. And from you guys and the things that I've learned, I'm definitely beginning to become more conservative, but I still have problems turning people away that are, it's a good deal. They're a good borrower. Everything makes sense, but it's just not. So for example, say like $150,000 purchase price, $350 as is current value, not even ARV, like a really good spread on the project. But in that case, like with that situation, you would still require them to bring cash to the table, right?
Wait, so they're buying it for $150 and it's worth $350 as is?
Correct.
And what's the renovation budget and what's the ARV?
Renovation's probably 50, ARV's 500 to 550. Like a screaming deal, really good deal.
Yeah, I mean it's a super screaming deal. So I mean, I don't. But
you would still require them to like bring cash to close, correct?
I mean, the first thing I would tell them, I mean, personally, if this was the exact, if somebody called me and I would say, hey, listen, man, you got $200,000 in equity. Why are you even messing with it to try to reap additional rewards? Freaking take your 200 gross wholesale it or sell it, wholesale it, and move on. That would be the first thing I would tell them, and see where their head is on that. But that would be first off. I don't see deals like that are that strong. I mean, most people that in our markets that we're seeing, they're buying it for investor retail, which to me is like, yeah, cool. I'm buying it at an okay price, and like, so be it. Like, there's no room to just buy and then resell something. They're making their money because it's a value add project. And so I don't really see those, but yeah, I mean, I have in the past, and we did 100% financing early on. And the market was different, right? I mean, I was, there was areas I was doing $200,000 loans on that the property's worth $1 million now 10 years later. But you don't know that. My concern in today's market is that pretty much all areas of the country, the properties have appreciated so much, over the last decade. And then it appreciated like bonus since COVID. A lot of properties doubled since COVID, right? So they kind of like doubled between 2009 and 2000, then doubled again in the last 4 or 5 years. So like that makes me nervous of like, if there's a correction, what happens? In some markets, obviously, some will overcorrect, some won't do anything. Like it depends. It's very so I mean, I can only speak for my region and the areas that we're in, but I'm nervous that stuff's overpriced. I mean, the rents don't support the price if somebody would buy in a property. Like you can't really buy rental properties that make sense. The interest rates obviously have gone up, 200 basis points, maybe more, and the real estate market hasn't changed. Like it didn't even slow down, so that's scary. So I just think I've seen a lot of borrowers walk away from sweat equity, but not their own personal cash. I've seen people walk away with personal cash as well. But I mean, I've done deals where I did a $170,000 loan amount because I didn't really like the deal. The borrower brought $170,000 into the deal of his own money. It wasn't gap funding. He put up 170, we put up 170, and he walked away from the deal. And we ended up having to take it back in foreclosure. Like shit still happens.
Wow.
You never know. I'm not saying that's common, but like there's a lot of one-off situations after you're doing volume that equal a lot of stuff. I mean, we become concerned. We've a lot of us being conservative is learning from not necessarily mistakes, because a lot of the deals that have been defaulted, we would still write the exact same way, but learning what happens on transactions and being like, oh man, like, cool. We can't lend in this particular neighborhood to lower credit score borrowers with big construction projects because they all default. If they can't manage their, like it's hard enough for an expert to manage $100,000 construction budget. How's somebody going to do it who, one, inherited a property that's never done this before, or two, has low credit and they can't manage their household expenses? And then what happens if, they run out of cash and they're like 90% through the finish line, but then they don't have any access. They have, low credit. They have no access to any other capital. They can't get a credit card line. They can't go to Home Depot to get, whatever the case is. So a lot of this is just learning from defaults and seeing that default, like a real bad default loan can eat up a lot of equity. I mean, there's the reason why, you always have 35% plus equity in these deals, because if it's a contested foreclosure or a bad default, or if you're in also depends on what state you're in, right? Some states, the process could take a year or longer than a year. Some states it can be done in a few months. So you got to take that into your underwriting factor. But we've seen it, and we've seen, good deals where crappy situations happen, where good borrowers go over budget, and, shit happens, right? Like we had $100,000 of equity that gets eaten up really, really quickly. And soon as and the big issue in general is if a deal starts going sideways and the borrower walks away from the property, there in essence ends up being a lot more deferred maintenance than one might think. If a property is renovated and on the market, it's a good renovation, like the risk is very low.
Right.
The issue is day one through day like 90.
Right.
Because if the borrower walks away day one, maybe not the situation you just said, but they walk away from day one, like most of the times the lender's in a tough spot if they gave them high leverage loan. And if the property is only 50% renovated and maybe they didn't do everything perfectly, even if you monitor it, it still doesn't mean that it's going to get done perfectly. You can get stuck in a bad spot and you have to like redo stuff. So we've kind of taken the stance that we want to make sure our borrowers have enough skin in the deal, even if they're buying a home run deal, just to prevent them from walking And part of like my sales spiel script to them is like, listen, I don't want to babysit you, and you don't want me to babysit you. Honestly, if you can put down a little bit more money, it's just going to be an easier transaction. The draws will be quick. I'm not going to micromanage you over like a $2,000 draw. If you tell me that you spent if you told me you spent 12 grand on this roof, and I know it probably only cost 7 grand, like I don't care. I don't care because you're already fully vested on the front end. So I use that in scripting, and like that has to be done over the phone or in person. It can't be done like kind of over email because, you know, I'm quoting them a $150,000 loan with a $65,000 cash to close, and they're finding someone to give them, you know, $27,000 cash to close. So I got to justify the $40,000 gap, and I can justify it with, hey, we've been around for a long time, we're local, you know, we can meet in person. I'm going to give you quick draws. I got a full-time inspector on staff. It's going to be an easy transaction. We're going to close on time. I'm not going to micromanage you, things like that. And, you know, if you've ever been in a situation where you use institutional capital or private capital, it's night and day. It's a big situation. And there's certainly a gap of like, hey, I can bring 20 grand here. I can bring 60 grand here. It might be worth my risk to bring less money to the table. But that's not everybody. You know, a lot of lenders, including some of our business partners, have limited beliefs on all of these deals of like, dude, I don't think I can sell this. And it's like, hey, just have a verbal conversation. If it works, it works. You don't have to close every deal. You know, if you're heavy on the front end and you're getting deals on a regular basis, there's lots of deals where somebody calls me where it's like, I'm buying this property for 400 grand. I only need 200 grand. And I don't want to spend the fees on the other money because I have the cash anyways. And I only do one deal at a time. So there's a lot of borrowers. There's a lot of deals like that. Like I do not try to compete with Kiavi. Like
Right.
if they're trying to do something with Kiavi, like I'm not going to compete with them. If all they care about is a cheap rate and high leverage, and that's the only thing they're worried about, like, listen, I'll try to sell them on why, you know, they should try to go with us. But that's it. Like, I'm not going to fight with them. The answer for somebody like that is, listen, let us think of me as your plan B lender, right? Go down this road, see if it works out. I hope it does. If for some reason they back out last minute or you got to close in a few days, give me a call. I mean, there's lots of reasons that those good lenders, or I shouldn't say good lenders, that's the wrong word. Those lenders in general can't do deals, even for good borrowers. Sometimes the wholesale fee is too high, or sometimes the construction budget percentage is higher than the purchase price. Like there's other things that occur that those deals will fall out, or they, you know, whatever, they can't close quick enough, or the appraisal, it underappraises, whatever it is. And I'll tell people that, and I'll say, hey, listen, give me a call. And that'll work. I mean, the majority of our portfolio, the majority of our good borrowers, they're doing dozens of deals a year, and I'm doing a few of them. And that's it. And I'm not trying to do their 20 deals a year. Give me 2 of them, and I'm happy. And I'll get a lot of people that can give me 2 deals. So that's our strategy.
We talked about that too in the, you know, during the inner circle meeting in Tampa recently, is like, you don't want to compete on volume. That's not where you're not a points machine. That's not where you're trying to make your money. Like it's not about, and that's been a big like mental shift for me too. Like it's very wise to be able to streamline, slim down. You get to cherry pick the best of the best. And it's just an overall business model. And you also touched on this a little bit before, but like B2C versus B2B, you know, just in like some of my past experience, B2C is just, it's the biggest pain in the ass. Like you're just like I have sold, you know, I'm in the software space as well. And so I have sold $10 a month subscriptions, and I will get clients who will email me asking for the world. Or, you know, we have $10,000 software clients, and they send me an email and says, "Okay, wire sent, let's get started." It's night and day difference. Like B2B is where it's at.
Yeah. I mean, why do you think, like, it's the same reason why we only do a mastermind group for high level lenders and charge a premium for it? Because I'm not coaching. I'm not maybe babysitting situations. It's like, hey, listen, I'm happy to do consulting, and I'm happy to help you with what's working and what's not working. But like, we're beyond the 101 stuff, right? It's the same situation. And, you know, I remember, I've heard this story lots of times by multiple different people. I think the most recent time was from Hermosi, when, you know, there was 2 different people, and in essence, you were selling the same product. One of them was like $59 a month, and one was $50,000 up front, and the one that was $59 a month was like, can you give me all the pros and cons and all the benefits and what I'm going to get out of this and where I should be in a year? And the other guy that was going to pay 50 grand just said, what's your wire instructions? Yeah. And that's what it is. And that's what it is. The same thing with our mastermind group. It's the same setup. It's, hey, I want a cheat code I want to pay a premium for a premium service. And like, I understand that that's what the cost is. It's the same thing as your software. And most marketers in general will always tell people to up price, like up price, because you're dealing with a higher clientele. And like, I don't want to mess with lower price point properties, mostly because, like, let's be honest, if I can make 3 points on $1 million deal, I'd much rather do that than on a $100,000 deal.
Absolutely.
So like we have benchmarks where we like don't like want to lend in certain areas. It attracts the wrong type of clientele. I want sophisticated borrowers. A big part of our business is commercial assets, commercial loans that we really went hard on maybe 7 years ago when we really started. We were doing some before. And I mean, maybe this is also part of it because it filled a gap because we were missing out on a lot of fix and flippers that were using institutional capital when institutional capital was at its prime, right? So, and they weren't doing commercial stuff. And to this day, commercial stuff's really hard for other institutions, for other sources besides private capital, which has been great for us. And that's been huge because the level of sophistication first off, the loan amounts are higher. The level of sophistication is better. They're all real, legit commercial property owners that have good cash flow coming in. Just the overall experience is great. The only downfall on commercial properties is the exit strategies are longer and they're more challenging, but it's overcome by other stuff. Like, as long as you have the right capital behind it, where it doesn't mind being outstanding for longer periods of time, like 90% of our commercial loans do not pay off within a year like they're supposed to. But I can do renewals year after year. You want a renewal? Pay 3 more points and we'll renew it for another year. Or if it's a deal that I might want to push out of a little bit, hey, pay a renewal and a 10% reduction of principal. So if we did $1 million loan, pay $100,000 down, and now our new amount's $900,000 and pay that. I can't tell you if we had a actual real default. Like actually, funny story. We have a group right now that we've done a few deals for, and we do have a deal in default, and it got close to foreclosure sale, and they're $136,000 or $63,000 behind, and we actually got a wire last night because it's supposed to go to a foreclosure sale next week. That's the level of sophistication. Like, they had other means to pay it. We're like, pay the legal 24% default rate of back interest and extension fee that we had, our 3-point extension fee, bring it current, and then cool, we're good. Just keep making payments again. Wow. Because they were a higher level borrower, they could do that.
Oh my goodness. That's incredible. Oh my word. Okay. Jason, I want to be super conscious of your time because I know we're getting close here, but like,
I'm good, man. This is fun.
I could go for hours because I have millions of questions to ask you, and you are a wealth of information, but I know you've got a busy operation that you're running. Let's go ahead and give us your socials, give us your email, phone number, any way that people can contact you if they either have a deal or just want to learn more about kind of like the consulting stuff that you guys do. Give us all of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have in essence 2 sides of the business, the hard money lending side. And, several years back, we had somebody reach out to us and says, hey, and you probably don't know the story, but this is actually how this mastermind and some of our consulting stuff even started. He reached out to us and said, I have $10 million of my own money on the streets, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing. That was literally the phone call. I have $10,000 on my streets, $10 million of my own money on the streets. I've been lending locally. I don't really know what I'm doing. Can you guys help me? I've been following your stuff on Hard Money Bankers, website. And I'm like, yeah, we don't really do that. And he's like, name a price. So Chris and I named a price. It was a lot lower than it should have been, right? Because like we just named a high price of what we thought was high. And he was like, cool. He flew to our office and we did like some consulting with them. And it worked out great. And we're like, okay. And
this
like,
is something.
Because we don't realize that, like, Chris and I talk about this stuff all day long. All we talk about is we're very passionate about this business. And, we were like, okay, cool. Maybe we should just like do YouTube videos and podcasts and stuff like that. Regardless. So we, our podcast is Private Lenders Podcast. Bryce was on was a great guest. We've
last
tried
week, I
to
think.
pick a lot of other hard money lenders throughout the country to bring on, and then a lot of it's just me and Chris, talking for 10 minutes about a certain topic. Usually, it's just relevant topics in our office of stuff that's going on. Sometimes we'll do case studies on deals. So, Private Lenders Podcast, you can find that on all the platforms. That's always a great way. And yeah, our main lending company is hardmoneybankers.com, and I'm in our office grinding on one of the two of those things pretty much every day.
All day long. I love it. Well, and here's another pro for the Private Lenders Podcast. Like, long before I was, doing what I'm doing now, I binged every single episode. I think there's 200 plus some odd episodes now sitting there on Spotify. And I think I'm up to 190 now, but at the time I listened to all 180 episodes all the way through. And it's transformed my business and made it better. It made, improved our systems and operations, lowered our LTVs, more conservative, all the above. So absolutely, if you're listening and you're trying to learn more, which you probably are if you're listening to this podcast in the first place, definitely check out the Private Lenders Podcast because it is a wealth of information. And then Jason too. At some point, we want to get Chris on here too, and kind of hear his side on the back end and managing the defaults. And
yep.
you guys, like I said, you have a well-oiled machine, and you're doing a good service. So thanks for everything you do.
I appreciate it.
So
No, it's it's fun talking about this stuff. It's good. It's good to talk to other lenders that it resonates with, that understand, and there's no playbook for this business, right? We're trying to kind of create a playbook for this and help based on our experiences, but there's no playbook, and there was not a playbook. And we didn't really have any mentors early on besides just begging some of these, 75-year-old guys. Well, I'm in my 20s. They're older than my parents, they're like almost grandparents age, to be like, hey, how do you do these types of things? And then talk, and everyone does it differently. I mean, the way you operate your business is different than ours. There's no right or wrong way to do it. There's a lot of different ways to potentially do it. And you kind of just mold. Like, some people have asked me, like, why do you set up like this? I'm like, I don't know. That's just the way we've always done it
for 20 years. And that's the way it is.
Yeah. And it's worked. So, I mean, I'm only, kind of talking about experiences that we've had. That's just, I feel like we've had a lot of experiences. We've had borrowers die. We've had lots of different things of like, what do you do in this situation? And I will tell you that I get a lot of fulfillment from our mastermind group because, how sometimes you learn from teaching or from on that side, like people ask me questions, and I get a lot of value out of that. And it's like, that's a good question. This is the reason why. So it kind of sharpens my skills at the same time.
I love it. So good. Okay. For, like I said, I want to be conscious of your time, so we'll let you go, but, seriously, thank you so much for being here. This has been so helpful for me and for all of the listeners too. So we appreciate you being here.
It was a lot of fun.
For everybody else listening, that's it for this week's episode, and we'll catch you in the next one.